In tonight's Dateline Defense, the drone debate. Over the past few days, 3 drones were spotted close to flights trying to land at New York's JFK Airport. Now the Department of Homeland Security has issued a warning to law enforcement that terrorists could use the unmanned aircraft to bring down planes. Joining me now with the latest is retired Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor. He's a decorated combat veteran, author, PhD, and Executive Vice President of the Burke-Macgregor Group. Doug, there are more incidents of drones flying at airports and lasers shining into cockpits. This is the kind of disruptive mischief that ISIS and other terrorists are promoting. Am I becoming a conspiracy theorist, or could there be something to this?
No, I think there is. Unfortunately, it's very hard to gauge. We're only at the beginning of this process. These things are proliferating. Pretty soon, any 12 or 13-year-old will have access to a drone. So the question is, how do we regulate it? How do we control it? How do we suppress the use for the wrong reasons? There are a lot of people looking at security at airports right now, particularly airspace. There are some things that could be done in the air that might help, but we're a long way from answers. So this is just the beginning of a long process.
And the reason why I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there's something to this, is because weeks ago there were reports of up to 30 laser incidents across the country, mostly on the East Coast. Now, sure, some of these people are kids playing with lasers. That's been a problem for the past 5-10 years. But to have so many incidents so often, you know that ISIS on the deep web, they're encouraging actions like this.
Of course, and look, it's cheap. It's cheap and potentially cost effective. It's very easy to interfere with the flight of an aircraft trying to land or take off. So we're going to see it happen, and the question is, what can we do about it? And there are a number of things that are being examined, and frankly, I don't want to mention them on the air because they may work, and there's no reason to alert the potential terrorist.
How good is airport security, and how vulnerable are the airplanes?
Oh, I think they're very vulnerable. Even if a part of one of these things ended up in an engine, it could be catastrophic.
Let's switch gears to China. The country's government is claiming that the South China Sea is their own, causing tensions to rise between the Chinese and other Southeast Asian countries. But in a diplomatic effort, both parties have established a foreign ministers hotline. Tell me more about that.
Look, I think the Chinese, in a proverbial sense, stepped into it. They tried very hard to assert themselves in the region. They discovered that by doing so, they alerted everyone to their hubris and arrogance. No one in the region beyond the borders of China will accept the old Sino-centric order. That's the historic order of the region for 1,000 years. The Chinese created the illusion that they were going to try and do this economically and potentially militarily. They now realize they made a terrible mistake. And what they're trying to do is to restore some civility to their relations with the people on their periphery, who, after all, they still want to do business with.
It shows you that if you're the bully on the block, sometimes if you stand up to the bully, it works.
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely does, particularly when you get everybody on board, which is what's happened in the region.
All right, meantime, the China stock market is plunging, and it appears the country could be starting a recession. How does that affect China as a world power?
Well, it's a very serious challenge to the Communist Party. The Communist Party likes being in charge. The elites want to stay in charge. The principal threat to them internally is the possibility that this economic downturn could produce mass unemployment, unrest in the countryside and in its large cities. Remember, millions have left the interior and come to the large cities looking for work. Millions of these people live in unbelievable poverty. So if this slowdown continues at the current pace, the Chinese are going to have their hands full at home.
It's affecting our stock market as well.
Well, of course, everything will affect us eventually. In the short run, we actually in some ways benefit, but in the long run, we too will feel the impact.
All right, before we go, Doug, let's get back to ISIS. It's suspected that the first wave of Syrian rebels trained by the U.S. to fight the terror group have been killed. Now the Pentagon says it will provide air support for others they plan to train. Is this a good idea?
Well, first of all, let's reflect a little bit. During our unhappy occupation of Iraq, according to Pentagon spokesmen and people in Baghdad, we killed the insurgents 3 or 4 times. In other words, the numbers that they cited, we kept killing 30 or 40,000 every so many years. It didn't seem to make any difference. ISIS is not short of recruits right now, and the more we attack them, the more popular they become, the more celebrated they are, because they're, after all, standing up against the great Satan, the evil United States. So I don't think this is a very good idea. The other problem with this is that there are many different actors now in the region with different agendas.
Really, yeah.
Aligning yourself with one or the other puts you in conflict with someone else. Mr. Erdogan in Turkey has an agenda. That agenda includes suppressing the Kurds and potentially installing his own puppet government in Damascus. ISIS, or the Caliphate, is in part his creature, along with Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, because it's the front line in the fight in Iraq against the Shiite government and its Iranian sponsor. This is very complex. The notion that we can come in and hit the right target, not hit any civilians, be antiseptic, precise, and perfect is nonsense. Never works that way. We're going to have some problems.
It's going to be a problem for us taking sides, isn't it?
Very much so. Frankly, I don't think we should, but the president is trying to satisfy his critics. He's also trying to do something that he thinks or his advisors think is positive. I think it's the road to disaster, frankly. We could come into conflict with all sorts of people that we don't need to fight, frankly.
It's always good to get your insight. Retired Army Colonel Doug Macgregor, Executive Vice President of the Burke Macgregor Group. Thanks again, Doug.
Thank you.